Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinars on achieving business agility with the Scaled Agile framework. Business agility represents the ability of an organization to rapidly respond to changing market conditions and continuously deliver products and services that meet evolving customer demands. The Scaled Agile framework, SAFe, supports enterprises in realizing this goal by providing a knowledge base of proven integrated principles, practices, and competencies for lean, agile, and DevOps. Our presenters today are Nader Talai, business agility consultant at ValueGlide with over 17 years of experience in Agile, helping clients with their Agile transformation through training and coaching. Nader will explore the mentioned topics together with Andrew Sales, senior consultant and SAFe program consultant trainer at Scaled Agile. Scaled Agile is the creator of the Scaled Agile framework, which has become the world's leading framework for enterprise agility. So what are we going to explore in the following hour? We're going to explore the role lean agile leadership plays in driving and sustaining organizational change by empowering individuals and teams to reach their highest potential. We're also going to explore how to create strategic alignment across development teams and the importance of organizing around value to improve quality and accelerate delivery. And lastly, we're going to look at approaches to building in fast learning to continuously validate that we're delighting customers and meeting the needs of the business. So we're going to have a presentation of approximately 40 minutes. And at the end of the session, we're going to take all of your questions in our Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions, write them at the right of the screen, and we'll make sure to cover them at the end of the presentation. So welcome again, everyone, and I'm now handing over to Nader.
Thanks, Emma. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you on the webinar, and thank you for joining us. So before we go further, let's do a quick recap on the problem that Agile software development frameworks and methods and the Agile Manifesto set out to address around 2001. The manifesto and the Agile umbrella of methods were designed to make the life of software developers who were working in project-based teams and were kept at arm's length from the customer better. Software development with separate testing and deployment cycles led to people involved in software development working long hours and being seen as slow, costly, and not delivering what was requested. Agile Manifesto was a rebellion against this way of working and addressed the points that software development teams were experiencing at the time. The focus was the team and improving the conditions for the team members. We have been successful at addressing team-level agility in organizations, and we have team-level champions like Martin. Let's do a quick poll. So, do you have Agile teams? You can just respond on your poll. Okay. Shall we start back, Emma? All right. So let's meet Martin. Martin recently joined a new organization and was not happy with how his team was developing new features. Speaking to his manager and the downstream teams, he got feedback that the development was slow, and when the products were deployed, it needed many hot fixes before it was stable. The sysadmins, operations, and support teams resisted any new deployments because of the high level of post-release defects that needed for them to respond to, and also for them to be responding to user problems out and in hours. Martin introduced his team to Agile ways of working and worked with his team and improved his team delivery rate and predictability. Martin was happy with how successful he and his team were in developing new features and removing defects, which was recognized by his manager, and the team got the recognition and more new features to work on. Martin declared, "We are agile." Angela, the CEO, heard about the successes of Martin's team and the fact that they were agile. Angela asked herself, has our time to market reduced? Are we gaining more customers? Are our employees more engaged? And she wasn't sure whether they were agile. As we know, team-level success does not lead to business agility. With the team levels at Agile, we are looking at local optimization and self-satisfaction. In other words, our team or section improving and becoming selfish at the expense of the overall system. Business agility is not about how many agile teams we have. It is about how well they interact to achieve the goal. Let's do another quick poll. How many agile teams do you have? Okay, let's moving on. So let's explore how Angela can help her organization to achieve the agility they desire and explore the key levers that may help. Angela wants to reduce the time to market and needs her organization to organize around value to improve quality and gain higher productivity. She also wants to ensure that the execution is aligned with strategy, and with this strategic alignment, she wants to enable decentralized decision-making and leadership. Angela also knows that for her organization to be successful, maintain their competitive advantage, and grow, they need to foster innovation and generate fast feedback and learning. Angela knows that this is only possible if she employs a new style of leadership with a cohesive framework. I now hand over to Andy to cover the first 3 points, and I'll cover the last 2. Andy?
Thank you, Nada. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see my slides there. Emma, can you see those okay?
It perfectly, Andrew. Thanks.
Okay, so as Nada mentioned, I'm going to cover those first 3 bullet points, and we're going to start by talking about organizing around value. And Lean Agile methods focus relentlessly on the goal of accelerating value delivery. And the key step there, the key first step, is identifying and understanding how value flows through the organization, how value is created, and ultimately how value is delivered to our customers. And the big challenge that we see is that traditional approaches to organizational structures tend to be optimized for skills, for management efficiencies, and therefore are generally organized around functional areas. In contrast to this, we see how value flows across these silos. And in fact, the more complex our solutions get, the greater the handoffs and communication required in order to build and deliver these products and services. So for all the reasons shown on this slide, this way of organizing is not going to be conducive to flow. In SAFE, in the Scaled Agile framework, we take an approach to organization around value streams. And what we mean by value streams are all the steps needed, including the people, the systems, the information, in order to deliver value to our customers or to the business. And that value may be developing and deploying a new solution. It could be maintaining a set of related products, or it could be delivering services. But organizing around value streams is going to offer us substantial benefits, including faster learning, shorter time to market, higher quality, higher productivity, and ultimately more agile and lean approaches to budgeting. Now, when we start to think about all the people involved in the creation and delivery of value within one particular value stream, it's very likely that they're going to be distributed across the organization. In fact, not only will they likely cut across those functional boundaries we saw earlier, but it's also likely to be the case that they're going to cut across geographic boundaries. So in SAFE, we like to talk about creating a virtual organization of all the people who need to work together in order to create and deliver this value. And once we have an understanding of our value streams and the people that interact to create and deliver that value, the next step is to create and launch Agile release trains in order to realize them. So the Agile release train, the ART, is a long-lived cross-functional team of Agile teams. It's 50 to 125 people. It also includes critical program roles such as product management, system architect, and release train engineer to help manage the process. But the key message here is that the ART applies a systems thinking approach and builds a cross-functional organization that is optimized to facilitate the flow of value all the way from ideation through to deployment. The other significant benefit with identifying value streams and organizing Agile release trains around them is that they can be systematically improved. So over time, we can continue to analyze and inspect our processes to continuously increase our delivery velocity and quality. And an important step within SAFE as the enterprise matures is to map the value stream and make these continuous improvements. We pick the biggest delay, we perform a root cause analysis, we implement improvements, we measure, and we repeat the process. So the release train itself is going through a process of continuous improvement. Okay, so that's the first step, which is about organizing around value to enhance flow to the customer. But once we've created those Agile release trains aligned to the value delivery, the next step is to create strategic alignment. And one of SAFE's core values is alignment, and alignment is going to be absolutely critical when we look to implement Agile at scale. And by alignment, we don't only mean alignment of terminology, alignment of ways of working, we also mean alignment to a common goal. And Nada talked about decentralizing decision-making. Decentralizing decision-making is going to be one of the critical ways that we speed up execution. We can only do that if everyone is aligned to the vision, to the mission, if everyone is moving and striving in the same direction. The challenge that we see, though, is that often it can be difficult to create this alignment. And Geoffrey Moore does a good job on this slide of presenting this challenge. He talks about most strategy dialogues ending up with executives talking at cross purposes because nobody knows exactly what is meant by vision and strategy, and no two people ever quite agree on which topics belong where. And that last sentence on the slide is really the key one. He identifies the lack of good business discipline as being one of the contributing factors here. And as we'll see in a minute when we go through this section, SAFE takes a very disciplined approach to portfolio management and provides a set of recommended practices that we'll look at that help us to converge and build strategic alignment. So perhaps the best place to start is just being very clear about what we mean by a SAFE portfolio. For a small to mid-sized organization, the SAFE portfolio itself may be equated with the entire enterprise. It may represent and govern all the solutions that are being built and delivered. But in larger enterprises, it's very common that the SAFE portfolio is much closer to lines of business. And in that sense, the enterprise would contain multiple SAFE portfolios. So for example, in a large telco, we could imagine a SAFE portfolio which governed all the cloud IT solutions. We could imagine another SAFE portfolio which governed their mobile solutions. Within a financial organization, there may be one portfolio around insurance, one around mortgages, one around investment. And the last example I have on the slide, in an education organization, maybe there's one portfolio around the higher education products and solutions. Maybe there's one around their qualifications business. The important point to make is that a SAFE portfolio funds and governs a set of value streams which we've just looked at, and their associated solutions. And these value streams will either deliver value to external customers or value to internal stakeholders through supporting internal business processes. So for example, in that insurance portfolio, we may have 3 value streams, one around home insurance, perhaps one around car insurance, perhaps one around travel insurance. And the role of the SAFE portfolio and the lean portfolio management team is to provide the strategic alignment for those value streams, to govern the investment and budget, and ultimately provide cross-value stream coordination and approval of large new initiatives. And we'll look at how some of that works in detail as we move through the talk. So the first role of the lean portfolio management team is to connect the portfolio to the wider enterprise strategy. And SAFE defines strategic themes here, which are our differentiating business objectives. And there's some examples on the slide: appeal to a younger demographic, reduce warehousing costs by 50%. So these are the differentiating business objectives that really provide our focus for the next 1 to 3 to 5 years. And these arise as a collaboration between lean portfolio management and the larger enterprise executive teams. And critically, this first step provides the business context we need within the portfolio for decision making. It serves as inputs to the portfolio vision, the budget, and ultimately the backlogs of initiatives, or epics, as we call them within SAFE, that the portfolio and the value streams are going to be delivering. Once we have a good understanding of the strategic themes, the next step is to clearly define the portfolio domain itself and the associated business model. And here SAFE provides an adaptation of the business model canvas. You can see on the slide here, we have the portfolio canvas. And very briefly, I'm going to step us through this. That top row lets us identify and clarify details about the value streams that are governed by the portfolio, the solutions they build, the customers they deliver to, the channels to market, their budget and revenue. And then the bottom half of the portfolio very clearly provides information about our key partners, our suppliers, what are the activities and resources we draw upon in order to support and deliver value as a portfolio, and critically, what is our cost structure, including operating costs, and finally, what are our revenue streams? So this portfolio canvas is a great way to provide transparency, alignment, and shared understanding. Again, we're trying to take a systems thinking approach to portfolio management. We're trying to build that alignment to a common goal, which will ultimately allow us to be successful in decentralizing decision making. The next tool we can look at is going to be helping us think about how do we map our solutions by horizon. And one critical role for the lean portfolio management team is to balance both core activities as well as plan for the future. The 3 horizons of growth model on this slide comes from the book, The Alchemy of Growth, and it provides a nice structure for enterprises to really manage these investments without neglecting current performance. And SAFE has extended this model slightly, and we'll go through this very quickly now. Horizon 3, these are those investments that are dedicated to investigating new potential solutions in the future. Perhaps they're research projects, pilot programs. They could even be minority stakes in new businesses. Horizon 2 are those emerging investments, solutions which have emerged from Horizon 3. We're starting to invest more heavily in them. And it could be that actually some of those investments never prove to be fruitful, and we have to decommission those solutions as we learn more about them. Horizon 1, we tend to split into investing and extracting. Extracting are those solutions that need very little ongoing investment, but they're still providing value to the business. Investing is clearly those ones where we're still investing in order to extract future and further value. And then, of course, most organizations have a set of solutions which we're decommissioning, and the retiring horizon helps to build clarity around those. Again, all we're trying to do here is create clarity for all of those working within the portfolio and make sure that we have a balanced portfolio focusing not only on what's important today, but what's going to drive business opportunities in the future. The size of the circles or the solutions on the slide represents the amount of investment and effort that's being put into them at any one time. So we've looked a lot at how do we define current work, but actually a critical role for the lean portfolio management team is to define a future state. And we can use a number of different techniques to think about this. We may want to use a SWOT analysis where we think about our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats, and then start to think about evaluating new options for where we want to take the portfolio. and we can use the portfolio canvas as a design thinking tool to help design and evaluate those different options. And on the slide here, I put up a couple of options for the organization working in the education market. Do they want to move into digital textbooks? Do they want to open new markets? Do they maybe want to invest in opening their own college? And ultimately, this disciplined process of evaluating different options gives rise to a future desired state. And from this desired future state, the associated epics, those big initiatives, will define the solutions that we need to develop to help us get there. And later we'll look in detail how we define those, and importantly, how we govern the delivery of them. So we've talked a lot about how we define and build clarity around the strategic objectives of the portfolio. But the last thing I want to mention is, how do we ultimately connect that strategy with execution? And in SAFe, we do this through program increment planning, PI planning. And this is the event that takes place every 10 to 12 weeks when the Agile release train comes together. Management sets the mission with minimal possible constraints, and the team spends 2 days creating the best plan they can using all their knowledge and experience. And through this 2-day process, new requirements and design emerge, collaboration takes place, dependencies are negotiated and managed. And the critical point here is that we're accelerating decision-making. Decisions that ultimately might take 4 to 6 to 8 weeks are now accelerated across a 2-day period. And ultimately, teams are taking responsibility for creating plans. So this is a step away from a command and control centralized program planning model. Management absolutely sets the vision, but the teams are the ones we look to help us understand what it is we can deliver and what it is they can commit to. And we finish the 2 days with a committed set of objectives that ultimately describe how we're going to align the work that we're going to deliver to the strategy that's been set out. And we'll have a look at PI planning in more detail in a future webinar. Okay, so the third critical aspect of business agility I want to look at is how we foster innovation and generate fast feedback. So we've covered the critical notion of organizing around value to accelerate time to market and drive continuous improvement. We've looked at the critical role that defining a strategy and aligning the teams to that strategy plays to ensure we're all moving in the right direction. But now we're going to think about, how do we ensure we're building products that delight our customers? And developing any kind of innovative world-class solution is inherently risky, and it's an inherently uncertain process. But this level of uncertainty often causes some enterprises to avoid taking these risks. And in fact, when they do, it can often be the case that they spend too much time or money. Maybe they end up ultimately building the wrong thing. So we're going to look at how SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework, addresses this challenge by implementing innovation accounting. And innovation accounting is a term coined by Eric Ries in the book, The Lean Startup. And the innovation accounting framework really consists of 3 critical activities. The first is the definition of an MVP. So what is the minimum viable product that we can develop to generate learning? In other words, what can we do to establish a baseline in order to be able to test assumptions and gather objective and actionable data? And then once we have that data, how can we use it to either tune the engine, quickly adjust to make sure we're on the right track? Or ultimately, how do we use that data to make a decision about either persevering with this particular piece of work or pivoting onto something else because we quickly realize that it's not delivering the value we expected, or perhaps there's something else of higher value we could be working on. And really what we're trying to do here is validate learning and reduce waste. And in order to do this, we need to build and implement a fast feedback loop. You can see on the slide here, we often talk about this as the build, measure, learn feedback loop. And we'll look in a minute at how SAFe implements that. Before we get there though, let's just have a think about the starting point. And the starting point for implementing innovation accounting within SAFe is to have a clear definition and intent for all of our initiatives that our stakeholders can agree upon. And the EPIC hypothesis statement, an example shown on this slide, is exactly that. It can be used to capture, organize, and communicate critical information about our epics. And obviously our epics within the SAFe framework are our largest initiatives, those that need the highest level of approval and are supported by a business case and an appropriate level of analysis. So for example, let's consider an airline wants to develop a website to allow customers to purchase tickets. This is a significant endeavor. It's going to consume a considerable amount of time and money. But before attempting to design and build the entire initiative, the epic hypothesis statement template can be used to start to develop a hypothesis, test assumptions, and think about how we can start to gain knowledge early on about the expected outcomes. So very quickly, just walking through the template, at the top, you can see it clearly says what it is we're developing in terms of who it's for. This is for airline members and guests who want to purchase tickets online. What is it? It's a website that provides the ability to purchase tickets, search for flights and manage upgrades. And critically, unlike our competitors, whose solution only really allows for ticket refunds. What's important about this template is how we define the outcome hypothesis. There's no accepted definition of done or acceptance criteria like you might have on user stories or features. Rather, there's an expectation of what we think the benefit will be, but we'll need to test and continuously validate. So we think the majority of ticket sales will occur via the website. We think it's going to decrease call center volumes, and we think ultimately it's going to improve customer experience. Critically, we define some leading indicators. So what are the actionable metrics we can use to track early to see whether we're moving in the right direction? Well, we think monitoring call center activity regarding flight schedules would be critical. We also think tracking purchases via the website rather than the phone will be another leading indicator. And of course, there's a few non-functional requirements around authentication and credit card transactions. Now, the critical step here is to ask ourselves what the MVP would be. And so perhaps the MVP, the minimum viable product, might simply be to deliver a few features that allow customers to research flight schedules. And we might hypothesize that the website, allowing them to search for flight schedules, will at least reduce some of our inbound call center questions about the same topic. And ultimately, it might increase hits on our website. The one assumption we're making here is that the website is going to be faster and easier than a phone call to the customer service department for our end users. And we'll look at shortly how we're going to use those leading indicators in order to track whether we think we're on the right track and to validate this hypothesis and generate fast feedback. So applying this build, measure, learn approach to epics provides us the economic and strategic advantages we need. And importantly, it's going to help us manage our investment and risk incrementally. By MVP, to be very clear, we're talking about incremental delivery of the epic through a set of features. And when we evaluate against our hypothesis, we're going to make the decision to see whether we think there's still value to be delivered, whether other features or epics that we have are ultimately going to be more valuable. Now, SAFe provides us two critical factors to support this process. The first is small batch size. By design within SAFe, all of our features will fit within a PI. None of them will be bigger than 10 to 12 weeks in duration. That's going to constrain the size of the batch. It's going to make sure we can accelerate the feedback. The second thing SAFe is going to provide is milestones. And milestones are going to be critical for us to analyze this feedback. We have milestones at the end of each PI. Every 10 to 12 weeks, we come together as an Agile release train to reflect on what we've delivered. We have continuous delivery milestones every time we provide value to our customers. And we can also define specific milestones around learning to force ourselves to stop and reflect on any actionable metrics we've got. And here's an example of some of the metrics we might have in this example. The data we've captured for the airline website shows that the call center data has decreased and website usage has increased. So the leading indicators are absolutely showing that our hypothesis appears to be validated. And of course, in order to do this successfully, we may have to build this telemetry into our applications as we design and deploy them. Just one critical point here is we want to be very careful about vanity metrics. And vanity metrics often give the impression of progress in the right direction. They might be things such as lines of code written, number of tests passed, or even raw hits on our website. But while they provide some useful information, they don't really provide any actionable metrics about how our product or service is being used by the customer. So in this example, if we were to purely look at visits to the website on its own, without validating a drop in call center usage, it wouldn't be enough to validate the hypothesis. We need to make sure that people aren't just using the website, getting frustrated and then calling us. We need to make sure we validate that they can access the information they require. And the question really comes, why is it that we focus so much on leading indicators within SAFe rather than traditional measures of ROI? And the first key point is that many of them are lagging indicators. By the time we're in a position to measure our returns on investment, the entire initiative may have to have been developed and delivered. And the other point here is that systems and software development are rarely homogeneous. It's very hard to use these kind of indicators to understand which features move the needle in which direction. And it also doesn't tell us anything about flow. How do we know whether we have large jobs that are returning a positive investment, but perhaps blocking the funnel for smaller, quicker work, which could improve our incremental delivery of value? And critically, how do we actually determine ROI for something that reduces risk or provides a strategic benefit? If we're moving into a new market, if we're not even able to charge for the products that we're delivering, this is a very difficult way to actually measure and validate progress. So for all those reasons, we want to think more about leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. And finally, just to summarize on this topic, the decision to persevere really indicates that we feel there's more benefit to be delivered. The leading indicators validate the hypothesis through the use of an MVP, and the decision to pivot comes when we think value has either been delivered or didn't exist, or something of more value should be moved to and worked on. This is a difficult decision to make, and often companies will continue to invest in an initiative despite data showing the contrary. And the critical point to make here is that within SAFe, as we apply innovation accounting, we're not thinking about sunk costs. We want us to think about what is the right thing for us to work on as an organization now, not what have we invested to date. And in order to allow us to pivot without mercy or guilt, we must ignore these sunk costs. And in fact, we must move to a funding model that removes the pressures and expectations of spending all the money we've allocated. We want to move to a funding model instead that allocates money to the value stream and allows them to take decentralized decisions about what's the most critical thing for them to work on at any one time. So I've covered those first 3 points. I'm now going to pass it back to Nada to talk about the critical role of leadership, and also then to talk about how we can deliver that change through the application of the SAFe framework. So Nada, if you can take the screen sharing, please, I will stop.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, hello. Not sure whether my screen is showing yet. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So Andy, thanks very much for taking us through why we need to organize around value, how do we create strategic alignment, and why do we need to foster innovation and generate fast feedback. So all of that is very different to how most organizations operate right now. We are used to operating in certainty, in other words, having a business case and knowing for certain that if we invest so much, these are the kind of returns that we're going to get. Now, moving the way we just walked through needs us to employ a new style of leadership. And so briefly, we're going to have a look at what those are. So leadership has a key role in achieving business agility. Leaders need to understand the current situation, why the change is required, communicate the vision and the need for the change, and how through their actions they can show the way. So it's important that the leaders act the way, the new way. It's no good just having words. We need to see the actions so that we can see that they mean it. And also, as humans, we like to imitate people. So actions are good. To achieve this goal, leaders need to immerse themselves in the work to understand how things are, understand the system conditions, and how to work on the system so it helps in aligning, coordinating, and achieving organizational-wide improvement. Again, we are very used to working on the individuals, managing the individuals rather than the system. So this is a critical change, a big change for leadership to act on the system and not the individuals. Oops. So leadership within SAFe has got two parts. One is to become lean thinking manager teachers, and the other one is to lead the transformation. So to become the lean thinking manager teachers, it means that we, first of all, need to understand and embrace the lean agile mindset and apply the principles of SAFe and the core values and behave in that way, so that we can then teach others. Leaders must do more than instruct people. They also must guide their organization through the SAFe transformation, making it easier at each step where they are. Making it clear at each step where they are, where they need to go, and why it is important to keep going. Leadership at all levels is enabled by decentralized decision making, which Andy also covered. So in his book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, Richard Rummel defines the kernels of a good strategy as follows: a diagnosis that defines or explains the nature of the challenge, a guiding policy for dealing with the challenge, and a set of coherent actions. So let's see how SAFe implements this. So as we can see, Angela's goal is to achieve business agility, and her challenge is that we have agile teams, but we don't have an agile organization. The guiding policy is for her to organize her organization around value, create strategic alignment, foster innovation, and generate fast feedback, and employ a new style of leadership, which we've seen. We also need, those are not enough. What we do need is a coherent set of actions, and those will be given to us by Scaled Agile Framework, which is a proven framework that provides a coherent set of actions that we need to deliver business agility for organizations. So we understand Angela's concern, and let's see how proven SAFe is. So it is valid to want to use a proven framework and not want to be a guinea pig or an experimentation lab. So let's dig deeper into SAFe. So Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe, for lean enterprises is a knowledge base of proven integrated principles, practices, and competencies for lean, agile, and DevOps. The practices of SAFe are freely available at the framework website, and they have been proven to work in integrated fashion in many organizations. In version 4.6, we've added 5 core competencies for the lean enterprise. These are now a primary lens through which we understand the implementation of SAFe. These are competencies, can be seen at the bottom, as you can see, lean agile leadership, and the right-hand side, and we will walk through them. Each core competency is a set of related knowledge, skill, and behavior which together enables the enterprise to achieve business agility. In other words, it gives the enterprise the ability to rapidly respond to changing markets, conditions, and continually deliver products and services that meet evolving customer demand. So let's quickly go through these core competencies. We've already covered the lean agile leadership, but just for completeness sake, the lean agile leadership competency describes how lean agile leaders drive and sustain organizational change by empowering individuals and teams. And they do this by learning and coaching SAFE's lean agile mindset, values, principles, and practices. The team level agility competency describes the critical skills, the lean agile principles and practices that are needed to create high-performing agile teams who create high-quality, well-designed technical solutions. The DevOps and Release on Demand competency describes how implementing DevOps and continuous delivery pipeline provides the enterprise with the capability to release value when the customer needs it. The Business Solutions and Lean Systems Engineering competency describes how to apply Lean Agile principles and practices to the specification, development, deployment, and evolution of large, complex solutions. Lean Portfolio Management, where Andy actually spent a little bit of time earlier to go through it. This competency aligns strategy and execution by applying lean and systems thinking approaches to strategy and investment funding, agile portfolio operations, and governance. Let's look at some of the results that organizations have achieved as the result of using SAFE. Okay, so these results are validated by organizations through case studies that you can find on the Scaled Agile website, which is scaledagileframework.com/case-studies. And there are many, many case studies that are written by the organizations using SAFE. And these results are reported by the organization with the achievements that they have. And as you can see, organizations are reporting that the time to market has been reduced from 30 to 75%. They have happier, more motivated employees, somewhere between 10 to 50%. And the defects have reduced from 25 to 75%. And the increase in productivity, which again is reported between 20 to 50%. These achievements are non-trivial, especially these organizations are all working at scale. But the results are also validated by the market. If we look at the market share of Scaled Agile Framework, by far it's the most leading framework in the market. Okay, how can we help you with your SAFE journey? We can provide you with we accelerate your journey with the following workshops, training, and consulting as needed. So Andy already explained why it is important for organizations to organize themselves around value delivery and move away from a functional design into one that is aligned with business delivery and customer outcome. So Agile Release, Train, Design, and Launch Consulting will help you do that for your organization. Creating strategic alignment is all about the lean portfolio management, making sure that the initiatives, the epics that flow through the portfolio are the right ones. We have the right hypotheses, we have defined the MVP, and we are ready to execute on them. And PI planning facilitation, PI planning, program increment planning, as Andy mentioned, happens on a regular cadence, 10 to 12 weeks. And this is where we synchronize across the teams that work within an Agile release train for the common mission and purpose. And we can help with facilitating of that. And of course, fostering innovation and generating fast feedback through safe implementation design. And needless to say that Scaled Agile Framework training is also available. So with that, I hand over to Emma for any questions that we may have.
Great. So thank you, Andrew. Let's see what we have. Some questions that we have from the attendees. Let's see. So I have one question here for Andrew. How might we handle the situation where our value streams include suppliers?
Thanks, Emma. So that's a great question. And actually, just very briefly at the end there, Nada mentioned the business solutions and lean systems competency. And really that competency describes not only what it means to build very large and complex systems, but it talks also to how to involve suppliers in the mix as well. And there's going to be a couple of scenarios. If the supplier themselves are applying lean agile methodologies, then either they may form a team on the agile release train, or perhaps a whole agile release train themselves. If the latter is the case, then there's recommended events and practices around pre-PI planning and post-PI planning to build alignment across multiple agile release trains. But if they happen to be working in the more traditional manner, then we want to make a number of demands on them. First of all, we want to ask them to provide a set of milestones that we can take into PI planning and plan around. We'd absolutely ask them to join in the regular demonstrations of progress that we're doing and show us how they are delivering the requirements and implementing the solution and all the accomplishments that they've achieved. And then critically, we'd also want to involve them in the inspect and adapt at the end of each PI. And this is the event where not only do we reflect on what it is we've achieved over the last 10 to 12 weeks, but we take a disciplined approach to making systemic improvements to the way that we're working. So we're improving our processes. So we'd want to get the suppliers involved in that because obviously they're playing such a large role within the solution development itself. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Does that answer your question? It seems like it did. Okay, great. So moving on to another question. I think Nether, you can answer this one. Where do we start with a safe implementation? Did we lose you, Nether?
No, I think I was on mute. Hello, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, good. So we have the implementation roadmap at Scaled Agile Framework website, which basically tells us or has the roadmap that has been proven through a number of implementations. And what the roadmap shows us is that we need to have a reason for the change. So we need to know why we're changing. What is the problem? Is it because we're using waterfall? Is it because delivery is too slow? Is it because we have ad hoc agile teams or we have ad hoc agile? There must be a reason for the change. And then once we have that reason, then we have enough, we've reached a tipping point, if you like. There is enough inertia for us to want to change. And then we need to start by having the lean agile leadership through training, which is the leading safe training. And then we need to work through our change agents and train them on the implementing safe. And also we want to identify the value streams and arts, which is about organizing ourselves around value delivery and customer. We then create the implementation plan, prepare to launch trains, because it doesn't matter how much planning we do until you launch it, you won't learn. So it's about prepare to launch your first train, train your Agile Release Train members, and then learn from it and extend and go beyond the first train and carry on, sustain and improve by launching more trains. There's a lot more detail that we can go through, but that's basically at a high level, that's what we need to do.
Good. I think we are happy with that answer. Perfect. So I have another question coming in to Andrew, and regarding your presentation, you mentioned epics. What size are the epics that you mentioned, and is there any guidance around prioritizing them?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So that's another good question. Within SAFE, we have different artifacts within the enterprise backlog model. We have stories at the team level, which are going to fit within a 2-week iteration. We have features at the program level, which will fit within a 10 to 12 week PI. And epics themselves aren't going to be time bound. So these are our much bigger initiatives, the ones that warrant financial approval, the ones that we have to do analysis and investigation around implementation strategies. So they could be 6 months in duration, they could be 9 months, they could be a year or more. But coming back to the presentation, the critical point is no matter the size of the entire epic, we don't think about it as something that is ever done. We tease out a few features, we group them together in an MVP, we deliver that MVP, and we continually ask the question, is there still value to be extracted from this epic? And if not, we move to something else. A couple of things to say about the prioritization piece. We didn't touch on this today, but we might do in a later webinar. Within SAFE, we talk a lot about weighted shortest job first as a method of prioritization. And really what we're trying to do there is look at the best trade-off between value delivered and effort expended. So we're trying to make sure that all the work we do delivers the best incremental value for the effort we expend. And perhaps in a future webinar, we can look at this, but certainly if you go to the website, you can see and search for weighted shortest job first as a prioritization technique. And the other thing you can see in the information on the framework is different strategies for how to break down the epic when thinking about teasing out some of those features in order to create the MVP. So there's some nice guidance around, do we start with one market segment? Do we start focusing on one use case? Do we focus on one business hypothesis? Or maybe there's a certain component or subsystem of the epic we need to deliver first. So hopefully that's enough just to kind of add a bit more detail. And as I said, there's lots more information out there if you want to go and find it.
I have a follow-up question, Andrew, on epics. You kind of answered a little bit already the question, but what does SAFE recommend in terms of an approval process for new epics?
Yeah, and we covered it a little bit, but in the last few minutes, I'll just add a bit more detail. So at all levels of the framework, we use a Kanban system to manage, visualize, and control the flow of work. And it's no different at the portfolio level. So we're going to use a portfolio Kanban to help us manage the flow of epics. And one approach, although it's not the only approach, is to have a funnel where we welcome all new ideas. They could be coming from anywhere in the business. And at this point, they're only perhaps a short description or summary of the intended benefit. And then we bring them into a review stage. And the review stage is where we create the epic hypothesis template. We want to apply work in process limits here because we don't want to detract too much from the current work that's underway. And this is where we first apply our prioritization approach. And whatever turns out to be the highest priority, we then take into an analysis phase. And one thing you can download from the SAFE website is a lean business case, because during analysis, we're doing a much more disciplined investigation in terms of projected costs, projected time frames, internal or external development, implementation strategies, et cetera, And again, ultimately, those things that get through analysis and are deemed most important move into the portfolio backlog. And perhaps just the last thing to say here about the portfolio backlog is it's critical to realize that this is simply a lightweight holding pattern. Epics sit in the portfolio backlog until the Agile release trains have enough capacity to pull them in. So we work on a pool-based approach. The epics are not being pushed on the Agile release trains. They're being pulled in once capacity becomes available. And then, of course, using the process that I showed earlier, we manage the implementation through this MVP approach, building, measuring, learning, deciding whether to pivot or persevere. And then obviously for any epic, once it's complete, there may be a set of final, let's say, release activities that need to take place. But ultimately then, once we moved off the epic, the next most important epic from the backlog moves into implementation. So again, there's lots of great guidance on the framework, but hopefully that's enough just to pique people's interest.
Great, I think so. So Nather and Andrew, we are coming to the end of this hour and the attention of our attendees of the 60 minutes that we promised in the invite. The last question is just related to where can I find more information on your training sessions? So I can answer that. You can check out our website at valueglide.com, or obviously the website of Scaled Agile as well. We will send you a follow-up email with this recording of this webinar. So any questions that might come up afterwards, you can review the recording again and send us an email with your questions. And we'll make sure to be in touch as well with the presentation slides and follow-up information, of course. So thank you very much for having been with us today during this hour. I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation and the information that we've shared. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on upcoming webinars. In the following email that I'm going to be sending out, we're doing a quick survey just to see what interests you may have. So if you have any other areas of interest related to Scaled Agile or SAFe, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll organize more webinars like this. Before closing the webinar, any last comments from Andrew or Nather?
No, thanks. Thank you. And thanks for the people on the call or on the webinar. Thanks for your attention.
Great.
And thanks, Emma, for hosting this one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinars. Have a good remaining afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.